Welcome to our How To Live tonight. We are so excited to be talking with you about family stories. How do we interview our families? How do we preserve their stories? How to record those stories? We're going to be talking about it all. And we've brought in some experts to inspire us and give us those how-to tips. So we can't wait to talk with them. But first, tell us if you're watching, where you're watching from. Let us know if you have already recorded any family stories, and if you have any questions. We would love to hear those too. So we are just gonna dive right in. I'm gonna introduce you to our experts for our panel tonight. Our first expert is Rachel Trotter, and she is a senior editor and writer at Evalogue.Life. Evalogue.Life, tell your story. And if you haven't checked out their website, you need to go over there and take a look. She loves family storytelling. A graduate of Weber University, she has had articles featured on LDSLiving.com, churchofjesuschrist.org, Meridian Magazine, and Family Search. We love Family Search. She also loves to teach about writing, interviewing, and storytelling. I've personally been to her classes at Roots Tech. It was the very last class I went to at Roots Tech last year, and it was so good. She knows what she's talking about. She's spoken at family history conferences, including Roots Tech, where I saw her, BYU, Weber State University, and Southern California Genealogy Jamboree. That sounds fun. I want to go to a genealogy jamboree. She and her husband, Matt, have 6 children and live on the East Bench in Ogden, Utah. And let me tell you something about Rachel. She has such a supportive family. When I was at her Roots Tech class, they were like right there, front and center, cheering her on. And I loved that about her. So we're going to bring Rachel in and get to know her.
Hello.
Hi.
So excited to be here with you tonight. This is such a wonderful project, and I'm so glad to be able to take part.
Thank you. We're so glad that you could join us. So we learned a little bit more about you. How about you tell us where your love of family history started and where you got this passion for writing and telling stories?
So I come from a really close-knit family. We always had get-togethers growing up and really close to my cousins and my aunts and uncles, and my parents always told about their childhood growing up, always told family stories. And I just had a really keen interest in learning more and understanding more. And so when my husband was doing his senior project in college, my husband and I decided for his project to interview every member of my maternal family. And I interviewed every single person in the family at that time. I think it was like 50 or 60 people. And then we put together a big video project. And that time it was on VHS tapes. So we had like 30 VHS tapes. And that it was so satisfying and so enjoyable to hear those stories, to hear those perspectives. And even just a couple years ago, we digitized all those stories, and to see the great-grandchildren and the great-great-grandchildren getting to know their family on a different level is just rewarding. And so over the years, all of that is kind of piled on. I graduated in communications, and so I was a newspaper reporter for several years and loved it. But I kind of started to really people would always say to me, you should interview people to tell their life stories. And so when the newspaper industry kind of started to change a little bit, I partnered up with Rhonda Luritsen, who I do Evalogue.Life with. And we started this business where we interview people, tell their stories, help give people tips and tools, and teach them about family stories and all of the wonderful things that can come from that.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. I'm stuck on that number, 50 to 60. That is trial by fire. That's a giant number.
Yep.
I love that so much. And I think that's such a fun transition. I started as a journalist too, and I just kind of got hooked into this family history world. And what a treasure. 50. That's amazing. Yeah. That is so good. And then tell us a little bit more about Evalogue.Life and what you do there.
So what we do, we're all about telling your story. So I interview people about their life stories. I do series of interviews where we record their story digitally, and then either they have that wonderful voice recording that is so fabulous to capture. We give them that, but then also afterwards we can write their life story for them. And so that's one component of what we do. We also have a lot of tips and printables and tools so that people can do it for themselves. If they feel like they want to interview the people in their family or interview other important people in their life. We also teach classes. So we have a lot of webinars and different classes that we teach to help people to learn the best parts of not only recording their life story, but also writing it as well, because that's really important. And then we have just different things we like to share. We have found a lot of success with youth and storytelling, and just different ways that you can draw those stories out of people and to help them with all of the best things to record, either digitally with a voice or to write down those family stories, because it's just the best parts of life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's fantastic. That's like the heart of our family history is the stories, and that breathes life into those names and those dates. And we're really excited tonight because we get to give away one of your story kits, and we're going to be doing that at the end. And how we're going to choose a winner is by the people who comment. So if you have questions, if you like what you're hearing, if you want to cheer about those 60 recorded stories, please do so in the comments, and we'll choose the winner at the end. So this is a little bit about Rachel. We're going to take her backstage for a minute and get to know our next guest, and then we'll bring you back out for the panel.
Great. Sounds great.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so our next guest is Sydney Jorgensen Walker, and she is a reporter with the Church News. Her previous positions include writing for the Deseret News and working as an administrative assistant for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As a student at BYU, she was editor-in-chief of the Daily Universe. One of her favorite assignments at the Church News is covering family history, which we love because we were able to work with her on articles about this very experiment, and we know that's how many of you found us. She loves learning new ways to connect with family and has felt the benefits of connection in her own life. She is the oldest of 5 children and claims Birmingham, Alabama as her hometown. She's a Southern girl. Sydney married her husband, Jacob, in November 2017, and they currently reside in Sandy, Utah, and we're going to bring her in. All right. Hi, Sydney.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you and Rachel.
Yeah, we're so glad to bring you in. When I was talking to you between the experiments, I just thought, oh my goodness, Sydney has so many just good interview tips, and even though it's the newspaper industry, it totally translates over to family stories as well. So we are so glad you're here. We just learned a little bit about you through your bio, but how about you tell us what made you want to go into journalism and what it's like to be a journalist and sharing stories?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually didn't grow up thinking anything about journalism, or I wasn't born with this idea. But I always loved writing. So I have loved journaling ever since I knew how to write. And I would write stories when I was younger, on pieces of paper and fold them and staple them and give them to my mom. I loved writing, and I read a lot as a child. And so when I got to college, I actually was an elementary ed major going in as a freshman. But I took a Comms 101 class and loved it. And I was like, man, this is so cool. And I think in a conversation with my sister, she encouraged me hey, why don't you major in journalism? And so I was like, great, I'll try it. I still didn't even really know. I didn't even, really know at the time what it entailed.
Mm-hmm.
But just through taking classes during my time at BYU and different assignments I was given, I was able to go to Las Vegas and cover a basketball tournament. And I actually went to DC and covered the election 4 years ago.
Oh,
And
cool.
I fell in love with interviewing and chasing the story, and just having the opportunity to listen to people and have my own perspective broadened, by other people's views. And anyway, I fell in love with journalism. And so being a journalist is great. I am working a dream job right now with the Church News. I'm getting to combine more of the faith angle type stories with writing. And yeah, it's been great.
Oh, see, that's fantastic. I bet there's never really a dull day with journalism, because your job is kind of, I mean, you're always writing stories, but there's always a new and kind of a different story. So
right, each day is different, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's exciting. From elementary ed to journalism. We're glad you're here in journalism. So I'm gonna bring Rachel back in, and then we have kind of questions for the both of you. And if anyone in the comments has questions, feel free to type it in, and we'll make sure that our lovely panel can answer those. So I'm gonna add Rachel back in, and we've got Rachel. Welcome back. Okay.
Hi.
Now we're gonna get into the meaty questions, and we kind of alluded to this a little bit in my individual chats with each of you. But why do you think it's important to record and share our own story and the stories of others, and maybe especially like this year with all the crazy things happening? Maybe we could start with Sydney, and then Rachel, you could go.
So I think it's important to record and share our stories, just because we can learn so much from these stories, right? So if we're reading stories that our ancestors recorded, a lot of times there's similarities between what we're going through in our day, especially, given the pandemic. If you had an ancestor that lived, through the Spanish flu or whatever it may be, any difficult time, I think reading those stories gives us hope and strength. Like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it. So keeping that in mind, it's important to preserve our own stories so that we can be a benefit for future generations.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. And then what do you think, Rachel?
Well, I agree a lot with what Sydney said. I just have found, especially during the pandemic and talking with different people and interviewing clients, that I think sometimes when you record your story or you have the opportunity to help other people, you find the worth of your life. I think sometimes if you just live your life and you think, my life's not so great or so exciting, or I haven't done much. But when you start to really record those stories of your life, you realize all that you have accomplished. And even if you think your life has been ho-hum, once you start recording those stories, you come to realize that you've accomplished a lot in your life and you've overcome hard things. And even if you've lived, a blessed life, you realize the reward that comes from that. And I think you don't discover that until you start that process of recording or even interviewing others. I think when you interview other people, it causes you to introspect about yourself as well.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Katie just commented. She said, I love that too. She says, I love that. Find the worth of your life. And that's kind of something we need during this COVID crisis. I think if we sat down and thought about like all that we have done this year, like we've been doing a lot of pivoting.
Right.
That's helpful to look back on. And I think about like, what would I have wanted to know about my ancestors, who took part in the Spanish flu? I liked that reference. I think Sydney said that.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting of what we can record for our posterity to know. Very cool. So Sydney, you write for the Church News, and then Rachel, you've helped many people record their own stories. Have there been like any favorites? Like what has been maybe a few of your favorite stories to write, or what have impacted you the most? Maybe we can start with Rachel this time, and then go to Sydney.
Well, I think one of the biggest things I found, I kind of referenced before, is I love the variety that you learn when you interview people, because people live such rich and rewarding lives. And I have loved being able to do that. I work with a lot of, this last year, I especially feel I worked with a lot of clients who are in the twilight of their life. I've had 2 clients that have had terminal cancer that I've had an opportunity to work with. And it's been difficult because they have passed on and I'm working on writing their life stories, but so rewarding for their families to have those stories and to see where they've come and where they've gone. This one gentleman that I'm working on right now, his family would all, when I would be interviewing him, his children would come. And so we would all have this time together, and how wonderful that was for them to learn and understand more about their dad that they didn't maybe really know all of that time. And that was really rewarding to be able to do that. And I can't even pick a favorite because they're all so awesome. I'm working on a story right now for a gentleman who was in World War II. He's quite elderly, and his story is amazing. You know, the things that he went through, and he met his wife while he was, serving, and just really interesting things. And like I say, everyone has a story. And so it's just so important to tell it. And I just love being able to capture those stories and share them. And then we took the time to interview my parents. My kids interviewed my parents. And that maybe is one of my favorites because I learned things I didn't know because my kids asked questions that maybe I had never asked before. So that was pretty cool too.
Well, and that's so fun to have the recordings of their voices asking their grandparents. That's priceless. That's such a good idea. And Sydney, what about you? What about the stories you've written?
Yeah, so one of my favorite areas that I get to cover is family history. And I had the chance to write a series earlier this year on some of the benefits of doing family history. And it's really this series that I think kind of has forever changed my life and really sparked this love for family history, realizing that it's not just names and dates, right? But that it actually makes a difference and it matters. So there's different parts of the series. The first part was looking at mental health, so feelings of anxiety and depression, how doing family history and telling and recording stories can help you through those difficult moments, as we've talked about earlier. The second part was looking at addiction, and I interviewed a couple people who have done indexing to help them through a pornography addiction, which is powerful. Yeah. And then the third and final part of the series was looking more at traumatic life events, abuse, or one lady lost her father to suicide, just different things, and how doing family history can help heal from that trauma, in addition to other things, of course, but help preserve the good, right, in what's going on, and not being afraid to tell the bad too. I think we can heal from that as well. So that was an awesome experience doing that, and it definitely impacted me. So
yeah, I love that. I read those articles, and it's amazing, and I think we relate a lot to those articles where people are vulnerable about their struggles and what they're going through, because that's the human story. Like I don't think no one has like the easy non-trouble filled life. And so I think it is important that we can cover the good and the bad. And that actually segues really well into the next question. So how do we record how do we ask some of these hard questions and record some of these harder stories? Like you mentioned, Sydney, the mental health issues, and talking about suicide and pornography. Like these are difficult things, and I'm sure like interviewing someone with a terminal illness. What tips do you have for interviewing about the harder stories? And we can start with Sydney. We'll just go every other one.
Sounds great.
Sounds great. I guess the first thing I would say is don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. Sometimes we think maybe people don't want to go there, or they don't want to talk about it, but more often than not, that's what people are wanting to talk about. We make small chat all day, but how often do you really get to talk about something that's forever changed you, or really had a big impact on your life? And And it is difficult to talk about those subjects sometimes. Sometimes it's emotional talking about that, and it's okay to, be emotional with that person if that's needed. That can be healing for you and for them. And then I would just say, don't be afraid to just listen and allow for maybe some quiet moments. I know when I first started interviewing, I was so focused on the questions I wanted to ask that, the minute someone was done talking, I jump in with my next question. Well, sometimes if we listen and then give them, a moment or two to breathe and reflect, they'll open up even more and say something even more powerful just by giving them the time to think through it. So I think those would be the things, not to rush it, and don't be afraid to ask about the hard topics.
I love that. The power of the pause. And then I'm excited to hear what you have to say, Rachel, because I know your tips at Rootstack helped my mom with writing parts of her story. So I know you have some good tips for us too.
Well, I think one of my favorite questions to ask is, when is a time you didn't think you would make it? And I have found that one of the best ways to help people to talk about that is to give them some time. So we talk about the power of the pause, but I even think you need to let people know a few days before, or, give them, say, hey, we're going to talk about some hard parts of your life, and I want you to think about it, so that you can say what's really in your heart. And it also gives you an opportunity to express the importance about talking about hard things, because people shy away from it a lot, and I often even think myself, if I'm going to ask someone a question that's really difficult, what would I say? Like, what would my answer be, and would I be willing to share? And so we have to kind of do some introspection to see what we can share, so that the people that we're interviewing, and of course, we're not going to share our hard things with them because it's about them. The interview needs to be about them. But I think we need to be able to make them comfortable. And so if you kind of start if you're doing interviews with people, start off with maybe a little bit easier stuff to talk about, so that you can build some trust, and so that they know that they can trust you with their story, with their hard story, and let them know that, while this is for their family or for whoever they choose to share it with you and them, they're safe right where they are at that time. But I think time is probably the best way to solve that. And just to remind them that, hey, you're writing, this is for your posterity. And if they know that you got through this really hard thing, they're going to be able to get through their hard thing, because we would do anything for our children and our grandchildren and the people who will come after us. And I think if we give them time to think about that, then they're going to be more willing to share.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. I think that's wonderful, and so true. Another question along those same lines: how can we talk? How can we interview and talk to our children and young adults? How can we help young adults and children to share their stories during COVID, during this year? That's kind of a surprise question. I didn't prep them for this one, but I know Rachel's worked with young adults sharing their stories. So we'll let her go first, and then give Cindy some time to think. Maybe just interview tips for working with children on up to college age students.
So one of the coolest things we did during the pandemic is my husband just started to try to find games that would elicit conversation. And so we played a ton of games during those first few months of the pandemic. And we would play games that would talk about family stories. So we have this game that we love called Pando. And and in this game, it asks the parents questions, and then the kids have to kind of race to decide who, what they know. And our kids love that game because it gives them an opportunity to really kind of find out what they know about their parents. Another really cool thing that we've done is using Family Search, using all of the different tools that are there. And because there's great questions in the Memories app.
Mhm.
There's great questions just on Family Search that, so it's not like it's your mom asking you the question, it's somebody else. And so they tend to like to want to talk about it a little bit more. And so that has been a really fun exercise. And I think another thing you can do is not make it seem stuffy and say, hey, I'm going to take notes about everything you say. Make it kind of casual, and then you can write about it later, or turn on your digital recorder and record it. Or we have a journal. We have like this joyful journal that we have where we ask our kids to write things down, happy things that they can write down. So those are a few things that we've tried to do. It doesn't always work. My younger kids are more, they're more of sponges with it than my older kids, but just giving yourselves time to talk and share, I think, is the biggest key. Sunday dinner, all dinner table conversations, that's where those things come up. And then, you can either, and maybe try and record it later, or digital record it is what we've tried to do.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I've actually done that at many a family dinner conversation. Like if my mother-in-law starts talking about a memory of like her grandpa or something, I totally just like push record on my phone, and then I ask her when she's done, like, oh, Shanna, I loved that story. Is it okay that I recorded it, and can I share that? Our phones can be good little tools. Yes, and you could even do that during your, and you probably already do, like during the Pando game, and just take out the clips that you want. So fun. So while you were talking, Ruth said that games were how she connected with her. Well, I'll just read her words. Games were how we connected with our kids during quarantine also. So fun. So I love how you did it in like an informal, on their level way too. That can work just as well. And then Mandy, she said, I never thought of recording stories at the dinner table. I love that. And I think that's such a brilliant idea, because that's like a comfort space. That's like a neutral space that might not be as scary. I will, let's see, Sydney, if you'd like to, I'll let you answer. And then we have a great question from one of our audience.
I love what Rachel said about not making it stuffy, right? Or I think that was the word she used, and I loved that. I grew up thinking that family history was boring.
Yeah.
And so helping, kids, teens, young adults realize that, hey, every time you make a family recipe, that's family history.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, every time that you listen to mom and dad tell how they met, that's family history. And then another idea I had while Rachel was talking is to take advantage of social media. Maybe create an Instagram account for your family. And I think every time we post on social media, we're doing a form of journaling. We're doing some family history. So that's another.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's fantastic. Let's see. So Leslie just had a great question, and it kind of goes, she says, how do you convince your older relatives to agree to these interviews? What tips do you have for that? And whichever one of you wants to take that one, or both, you're welcome to.
Do you want to go first, Sydney, or?
Sure. I would just say, that helping them realize that this is something that will last, that will help their posterity, whom they love and care so much about, remember and honor them. And Rachel has a lot more experience in this area than I do, but I think that would be something to tell them.
Yeah.
I totally agree. That is a really good way to start. And then another couple of ideas are to make it comfortable for them. Let it be on their turf. Since we're kind of in this pandemic mode, as far as me interviewing clients, I do them all from my home, and they're in their home where they feel super comfortable and at ease. And if you give them the questions ahead of time, then they can think about them and realize that it would be really fun to talk about these questions. Yeah. People love talking about their hometown. They love talking about food recipes. And those kind of things get the ball rolling. If you can kind of give them those. And then the other secret weapon to starting it is if someone that they love asks them to do it, they're going to be a lot more likely to do it. So, you know, I remember interviewing Steve Rockwood with Family Search, and he said, grandchildren are the key to bring grandparents on board with this.
Yeah.
And so if a grandparent will do just about anything for their grandchildren. And so if they were to ask them and say, hey, I have someone that wants to interview you, or hey, I want to interview you, they're not going to say no, chances are. And so having someone they love be an intro, you know, either ask them to do it, because I have a lot of children who call and say, hey, I'm going to give this interview to my parents for Christmas, or, you know, whatever. They will do it for the people that they love.
Mm-hmm. I love that. The kids is a secret weapon. And I love that then if you did recordings, you'd have their voices together. I think that's awesome. And then speaking of recordings, we mentioned like informally, like in a pinch, you can use your cell phone. But what are your, I know you each have different tools and things you use to record interviews. What are your favorite tools? Do you have like an app you use on your phone, or I think you mentioned a digital recorder, Rachel? What are some good tools, especially for beginners who do just want to, you know, interview grandma and grandpa or their kids about the pandemic? What are resources they can use to do that?
I would say I love my digital recorder. It's an Olympus, and I bought it. You know, you can get it on Amazon. They're about $50, and they're small. People don't know they're even there, you know, once you start using it. And I have a device called a TP8 that I'm able to plug into my phone and into the recorder so I can do the phone interviews. And it's my favorite tool to use because I can plug it into my computer and, you know, download everything onto my computer or onto the cloud. I save most everything on the cloud that I record. But there's also apps. I love the Tape-A-Call app for my phone. It used to be for Android, but now it's only available for iOS. But there's a myriad of different apps out there for recording that you can use. And then if you also are just wanting to do something quick and easy, you can record on your Memories app, your Family Search Memories app as well. And that is a really handy way. And you can, you know, upload that to Family Search immediately too. So those are three things that I use. But my digital recorder, I probably use the very most. So.
Awesome.
Me too.
Yeah, that looks familiar.
Favorite accessory, right? Yeah. Yep. And I would just add to that, there's a really great app out there that I use a lot for journalism and for writing called Otter. It's a website too, and it'll transcribe for you. And it's not always 100% accurate, but it saves a ton of time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're doing a 30-minute or hour-long interview, listening to it and typing it out, that's where you spend hours doing that. And so to have someone that transcribes for you saves so much time. And so it's free up to a certain number of minutes per month. And then it's a pretty low fee for monthly subscription. So that's another good resource.
Yeah, I wish they would have had that back when I was doing journalism. That's an awesome tool. I remember pushing play, transcribing, and then stop. And so that's huge. So that's Otter. Olivia had a question for us. I'm going to pop up. She says, do you use a special microphone? Do you ever use a special microphone?
So I do not, but for something more professional that Rachel's doing, maybe she does.
I haven't used microphones as much when I've been doing the phone, doing the interviews over the phone, just because I use that TP8, which is the device that plugs into the phone and the recorder. But my partner, Rhonda, she knows a lot more about microphones and has written an article on our website on Evalogue.Life. If you go there, she's got a lot of tips for microphones. That's more her specialty than mine. She just gives them to me and I use them. And I don't ask a lot of questions, which is probably my bad. But there's a lot of really great tools that you can use. Another really cool thing that has kind of come with the pandemic has been recording your Zoom calls or recording, your Google chat, that you do. I've done that quite a few times with clients, and it's awesome because you also have the video. A lot of times people want video, and video is difficult. It just adds a layer of complication. But now people are more familiar and comfortable with doing the video chatting with Zoom or, whatever mode you like to use. And all of those platforms you can record, and the sound is great. And then you also have that video, and it's kind of the wave of the future now that we're starting to see more and more.
Oh, I love that. And it's good that we're all becoming Zoom experts these days. We do a lot of Zooms. Patrice has another great question. Can you use a digital recorder while you're talking with the person online? So
I have done that. So I have a client that likes to see me while we talk. So she doesn't necessarily want that Google chat recorded. And so I also am talking to her on the phone while we're on the chat. And then that way I can record what she's saying while we're chatting. And that's worked out pretty well. I mean, it's not as ideal as just recording your Zoom call, but you can do that, and it works. It's worked out really well.
Oh, that's good to know. I love that. And if anyone else has any other questions, these have been fantastic questions. I'm learning new things. So please keep the questions going. I have a couple more for them as well. And this is probably one I should have said at the beginning. It's like how you start an interview. What is your best advice about helping people come up with questions? And we kind of alluded to it, like using on Family Search memories. I know they have prompts there for you. And then I know, like in journalism, we have our who, what, where, when, why. But would you elaborate on those, and how do you come up with questions for interviews?
Yeah, so I think it's important before you interview someone to learn as much as you can about them, at least from, that's what we do in journalism. Sometimes that involves, social media stalking or Googling their name to see what other articles come up. But that way you go into it prepared, right? You know a little bit about their life. And so instead of spending time, asking the basic questions, you can go into some of the more deeper questions and make the most of your time. So just backgrounding, a person or an event. If it's your grandmother, maybe reading some of her journals if you have them, or asking someone else questions so you can, know a little bit ahead of time of what specifically you want to ask if there's a certain topic you want to explore in an interview. So just background information.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's fantastic advice.
Sorry. I would say, you want to kind of make people feel comfortable. And so sometimes starting off talking about things that they love or they feel comfortable about, talking about, we kind of start off just in the chronology of your life. So, what is your earliest memory? People love to kind of think back about that. And sometimes they need a little time for that. But others that people really like to start off with is, and I mentioned this before, tell me about your hometown. Or another one that people love is tell me about your grandparents. What are your memories you have of your grandparents? And then people also love to talk about their favorite things. What was the favorite thing your mom cooked for you growing up? What were your holiday traditions, and what was your favorite holiday, and what did you do? Things like that really kind of light people up, because all of those memories start to come back and flow. And then you kind of just work through their life, talking about when they met the love of their life, or any of those any of the first time stories, also like your first job, when you met the love of your life, your first home, different things like that. People can reminisce, and those memories will flow to them if you ask those kinds of questions. And then it kind of gets them ready to talk about the harder things. And another thing people really enjoy talking about is their career. How did you get started in your career and why? And sometimes I have found as an interviewer, people really like to talk about it because it's such a huge part of their life. I mean, it's 8 hours a day for 40 years that they worked in this career. And so as an interviewer, you get ready to learn a lot about something you didn't know about before. And so that's kind of a fun and interesting thing as well.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. One of the things that stood out to me that you said, I love how you said, like, ask them about your grandparents, because I think that's huge with these interviews, is what is something that they know that someone else probably isn't going to know. We don't have memories of their grandparents, but they do. So I love that as a question. That's that priceless knowledge that they have. So those are great tips. Let's see. Oh, Alexis has a question for us. She says, what was the website again that transcribes for you? That's you, Sydney.
So it's otter.ai, and otter like the sea animal. So OTTER. So it's a website and an app.
Okay, cool. And we just put that in the comments so they can look at that. That is a great question. And please keep the questions coming. I have some for them, but I'm loving all of these questions from our friends, from our participants. Let's see. Okay, we're going to transition. Please keep the interview questions coming, but we're going to transition a little bit more to the family history side. And I would love to know kind of more personally, what are some of your favorite ways to be involved in family history? I know for your job, like it's both of your jobs to tell and record stories. But what are other ways you enjoy doing family history?
I love the family stories. I love looking in Family Search and seeing what family stories are there, and then sharing those with members of my family. So each, my maternal, my paternal, and my husband's sides, we all have, private Facebook pages. And so it's been really fun to find a story or find a photo and then share it so we can talk about it a little bit more. A couple of years ago, I was going like on a pioneer trek, and I had to choose someone in my family history. And I had this great grandmother that I did some research on, and I learned these things that I never knew. And I even found the origin of my own name, because I'm named after my grandma, but it comes from a long line of other grandmas that were named that, and I never even knew that. And so I discovered that. And so I think it's this discovery that comes from the stories that I love and find so fascinating. And then I have found, as I have shared those, the more I share, the more I learn. So, and even from just more distant family relatives that I didn't know before. And just really quick to give an example, when I spoke at Roostech last year, I talked about my Dutch ancestors, and a woman who knew my husband because he's a pretty in-depth family historian. And so she decided to listen to us. So she emailed me after, and she said, I never thought we had a very cool family history. She said, but then when you were talking about it, I realized that we are pioneers, in our own way. And then since then, she and I have made several other connections, and it kind of came from out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting it. And I think those are the parts of family history that discovery and then the sharing is just so powerful.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And how about you, Sydney?
One of my favorite things to do is to go through Google Photos. So I upload all my photos to Google Photos. That's another fun tip. And to go back, 10 years ago or whatever, and find a funny photo and send it to my family, and we'll talk about the memory behind it. Same with videos. And it's fun to relive those times, when my siblings and I were little, or, my dad had funny glasses or whatever it was. So those kinds of things. And then I can share a cool story that's happened recently. So as part of my job this year, I've been writing a lot of stories about women's suffrage. So this year is the 100th anniversary of women gaining the right to vote. And for Utah women, it's actually the 150th anniversary of being able to vote. They were the first in the nation. And so I had done a lot of research on this topic and written stories about, Eliza R. Snow and Emmeline B. Wells, who were friends with Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, these national women's rights activists. And there was one day when I was going through our archive, and I found this photo, and I was reading through the caption, and I noticed a name. It was Jane Snyder Richards. And that kind of a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, where have I seen that? Well, a couple days earlier, I was just playing around on relativefinder.org, which is a great website.
So fun
to see, who you're connected to. And she had come up as my fourth great grandmother. Well, it comes to find out that the story of suffrage suddenly became more real because I had an ancestor directly involved. Here's this woman, my fourth great grandmother, Jane, in this photo with these women, these women's rights activists. And so that was a fun thing. And I was able to call up. So I'm connected to Jane through my grandfather's mother, and my grandfather passed away earlier this year in May. And I was like, man, I wish I would have found this out earlier so I could have talked to him about it. Why we talked to our grandparents, this right here. And so I called his brother, who's my 94-year-old great uncle Cal. And we ended up talking about this connection to Jane Snyder Richards and Franklin D. Richards. And since then, I've had multiple people email me. I wrote an article about it for work, and multiple people have emailed me and told me that they're connected to them too. So it's just fun to see these connections. And like Rachel said, when we share them, we learn more.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely love that. It's like genealogical karma. As we share our stories and other stories, it comes back to us. And how neat to see your relatives so closely tied into that history. And as we learn the stories and share the stories, we see more our family's part in all of these things that are happening. That's so cool. How fun. Okay, we've had some pretty cool comments pop up. Leslie over on YouTube talking about stories. One of my daughters did an ofrenda and used a lot of memories we had put in Family Search to know what items to display. So that's cool. You can the power of those memories and posting memories and stories on Family Search. And then Ruth, let's see what Ruth had to say. My husband always thought that family history was genealogy research only. I think that's a common misconception.
Yeah.
One day he said, I hate family history. I only love the history of my family. Well, I think that's how it is sometimes, right? I think people don't realize that it is stories. It's not just names and dates. And I'm sure you think about women's suffrage like a little bit differently, knowing that your family is like intimately tied. How cool to see her in that photo too. Like that's just awesome. So to our audience members, please keep these cool stories and questions coming. We're going to give 2 prizes away at the end to everyone who's commenting. So keep the fun coming. I've got like a couple more questions for you. Have there been any of your own ancestral stories that have inspired you during the pandemic? We talked a little bit at the beginning about knowing, my ancestors did hard things. I can too. Are there any stories from your ancestors' history that have inspired you this year?
So I can just build off of, what I just talked about with Jane,
right.
and learning more about her. I was able to go on Family Search and read all of the memories and stories attached to her. And she came across on the plains and, lost children and was part of, settling the Salt Lake Valley and starting from scratch. And so that in a general sense just touched me in a way that, whatever I'm going through, like I can do it because Jane did this, and I've since found a picture of her that I framed, that I'm going to have here in our house, and just to have that as a reminder, right? So finding these stories and then doing something to make sure you remember it and remember how you felt, and that we can do hard things too. If it's a pandemic or, whatever, if we're moving somewhere, whatever the challenge is, we can do it.
I love that. And I love the reminder too. How you're going to post a photo, how Leslie mentioned they're doing an ofrenda. It's wonderful to have these physical reminders around us. as well.
Mhm.
So, Rachel, I mean, you talked about ancestors crossing the plains and your namesakes as well. Would you like to share another story about an ancestor who's inspired you?
Yeah, we had a kind of a fun thing this summer. My daughter lives in Texas, and her husband is going to school there, but it also so happens to be that my dad was born and raised there. And so I spent my summers going to Texas, and we have a family cemetery. But we decided to take a road trip to Texas this summer to see my daughter because we weren't able to fly and she wasn't able to fly. And so we went there, and we went to all of the places where my father and then all of my ancestors had grown up, and we went and visited these spots, and we took my new son-in-law, and he asked a lot of questions, and it gave me an opportunity to learn and kind of find out what I knew, because there are things that have just been in my head forever that I didn't really know that I knew. And so I was able to share that, and then as we went to the family cemetery, we were able to make some connections with family members that we hadn't ever done before. And it was just a really sweet experience to do that as a whole family unit. And it was just a cool experience to walk where they walked and to be where they were, because I don't know as much about that side of the family. And so it kind of gave me a glimpse into that side of the family that maybe I didn't know and understand before. So I know a lot about, my ancestors that crossed the plains compared to my Texas ancestors. And so I started to get my toe wet, and now I'm getting my feet in there too. And it's been a really cool experience to do that.
Mm-hmm. How fun. I love that. And I think there is like a power of place, and that inspires more conversations as well. That's so good. Well, I'm gonna ask our audience a question before I ask my second to last question to you guys. For our audience, as we're wrapping up, we want to know who you are going to interview. Who do you want to interview before the end of the challenge? Or is there a story that you want to share? So leave that in the comments, and that will count as an entry into our giveaway at the end. And then for our panelists, we've been asking this to everyone we've interviewed. We would love to know, how have you connected with your family this year during the pandemic? And it can be past or present.
I have 6 children, and my oldest 3 children are grown, and 2 of them are married and out of the house. And I spent a lot of time with my younger 3 children, just dragging them to their 3 older siblings' events for their whole lives. And so I didn't get the dinner table time and the game time that I wanted with those younger 3 children. And so this time has just been golden for our family to just sit around the dinner table for 2 hours, if we wanted to, or like I shared before, playing games and just enjoying the moment. I think sometimes in our busy and hectic lives, we don't enjoy those moments. And so in the present time, enjoying those moments has been priceless. But then also in the past time, we've taken a lot more time to look at family pictures, and my kids interviewed my parents, and just we kind of tried to just encompass it all as much as we could, because we have to look for the silver lining, right? And I feel like having that quality time to do those extra things was just like a gold lining, not a silver lining for our family.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And how about you, Sydney?
Yeah, similar things with my family. My husband and I don't have kids yet, but we've been able to spend a lot more time just FaceTiming our families. My family is in Alabama, and his family's in South Carolina. And so to be able to FaceTime them and have time to, talk, how was your day? What are you going through this week? Or, what's happened? And my family, we do a weekly call on Sundays.
Oh, fun.
And also talk about, what we've learned that week. And that's been really powerful, and it's made a huge difference to me. And I just think this whole pandemic has really helped us kind of slow down and spend more time on what's more important. I've had more time to, sit down with my husband and look at his old family photos, and he'll tell me stories about things. And so we're learning more about each other. And so I just think all around it's been a hidden blessing, right, of this challenging time.
Right. And I love that so much. And I love that we can find other ways to connect virtually. And so we're that much closer when we get to see each other in person. And I'm loving all these comments coming in. People talking about their niece posting videos and transcripts to Facebook page, interviewing the in-laws, family reunions, interviewing grandpa. These are all fantastic. I love it. So I'm gonna let Olivia find our two winners for us. But while she's doing that, my last question for you guys, and this is a question we can use in any interview, and it was my favorite question from journalism days, is there anything else that you would like to add? Like, what have we not covered that you would like to share? Is there anything else that we missed?
Well, just to kind of go out, I've talked a bit about, talking around the dinner table. And so for the connections experiment at Evalogue.Life, we have like a 4-day we have some little printables and little goodies that we want to share. If you go to Evalogue.Life/connections, I think Olivia will post that for you, but we have like 4 different days of printables. And the first day is about dinner table conversations and how to start really good dinner table conversations with your family and how important that is. And I would just say, if you want to interview someone or start their family story, start small, and anything that you do is more than what you did yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. So even if you only have time for a 1-hour interview, that's way more than you had before. And it will be a priceless treasure for whoever reads it or listens to it or enjoys it. Just start small. Don't eat the whole elephant at once. Just take it one day at a time, and you will have treasures to share. So just do it. Set a date, mark it on your calendar, and like Terralyn said, find someone you want to interview and just start. Even if it's only 30 minutes, just do it.
Yeah, I love that. And I hope everybody runs over there. I already got the email in my inbox with the dinner table conversations. And I love that what you're offering is it's doable, and it's nothing hard or too time consuming. It's doable. It's something we can do. So don't miss out on this perk. It is it's a wonderful free thing for everybody doing the challenge. So head on over there to the website here, and then it's also on our perks and partners page on the homepage as well. So we're giving away 2 story kits. And I'm gonna I think Olivia is gonna pop in and tell us our winners. So these story kits, could you tell us a little bit about them, Rachel?
Well, I'm not exactly sure everything that's in them, but I know it has our storybook. So we have a question book. We have a question book that Rhonda and I have written that goes through all the different questions that you can ask, whether you're planning to do a whole life story, or we also have our favorite questions if you just have time to do one interview, and it has those. And then it also has a lot of tools and tips for getting the best stories. And I believe that is what the giveaway is for today. So
awesome. Yeah. Well, we are so excited. I can see Olivia busy tabulating. Well, she's coming up with our winners. I'm going to tell everybody really quick. We have some more fun interviews coming up tomorrow. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. Mountain Time, we have the founder of Marco Polo. I've been Marco Poloing a lot. And we're going to talk about how Marco Poloing can help us connect during this crazy pandemic. So be on tune for that. We also have I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Robin Fivish from Emory University. And Rachel knows who she is. We based our experiment off of one of the studies that she did about how children who know their family's narratives and their stories, they do better. They're more resilient. And so we're going to be talking to her tomorrow as well. I believe that's at 11. And I am just so excited. Robin's doing research right now with college-age students and how they're sharing their stories during the pandemic. And I'm giddy about these stories. So I think, is Olivia ready? Do I need to add you in?
Hi, I wasn't planning on coming on, so my makeup's not done.
Oh,
That's
sorry.
Okay. That's okay. I'm like,
This is really nice, everybody.
Yes, no, it's fine. That's just my excuse for not looking great. All right. I'm just throwing this up there too. So we talked a lot about the perks and partners, like the perks that Evalogue.Life is giving us and different things like that. So I just want to make sure you know how to get there and visit it. Clanview's been here tonight. They're one of our partners that have been amazing, and they have some really incredible tools. So definitely go check out all of the cool things that are out there. Drum roll. Someone want to give it to me? Okay.
I'm the beginning of that.
For the story, or the booklet that Rachel told us about was Leslie Walker from YouTube. Leslie, say wahoo in the comments, and we'll know you're excited.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you so much for all your comments. You rock. You are awesome. I'm throwing up our email address. Go ahead and email me, because last time I had a hard time getting hold of the YouTube people. So just send me an email with your email that you'd like us to send it to you, and Rachel, basically just send me an email. Okay. And then the other winner is, Alexis Maurer, I believe is how you would say it. And she is joining us on Facebook tonight. So that's super fun. We have one person from each platform, but they both made a ton of comments, gave us a ton of questions, and they're incredible and awesome. So thank you for all of your participation. There was lots of people. I had like a ton here. And so I had to do a random drawing thing online to get the winners, because there wasn't like an obvious winner. It was like so many. So thank you for all of your comments. We had so much fun. And I just have to say to the two of you, on behalf of all the other participants, I loved this. I just learned so much. I'm so excited. Like, I hope this video, it's being recorded. It will live on at the links that you're watching it on now, participants. So share it with your family and friends. I was texting my mom. I'm like, you got to get on here. I know you want to interview. I mean, she's been wanting to interview people too. So this is like such excellent stuff. So thank you for joining us. You guys are amazing and wonderful.
You know what? I got so excited about the story kits and everything. I don't know if we gave Sydney the last word. Did we let you get your last word in? I think I just got so excited about the perks and the giveaways. So we'll let you have your last word, since I skipped over you there.
No problem. I'll just make a little personal plug for journaling. Write in your journal. Talk about how it's just you took a few minutes every day, and it doesn't even have to be daily. You can do it weekly or monthly. Sometimes I do it monthly, but we're living in a historic time. We've heard that a lot, unprecedented times, right? But really record your story, because it's going to be helpful in the future, and it's also beneficial for you to journal. So that's my little plug.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I love how so many of these tips have been like bite size. Like, don't try to eat the elephant all at once. Like, when we think about our ancestors, for some of them, I would love just to have a 2-line story, right? Mm-hmm. So something is better than nothing. So I hope everyone has enjoyed these tips. I hope you're excited to get out and interview. And I think we're good. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love what you guys are doing. Thanks for letting us be a part. And it was great sharing the time with you too, Sydney. It was awesome.
You guys are awesome. All right. So we'll go ahead and close us out here.